My pleasure to welcome you to the Skills Advance Ontario pop-up PD session for literacy and basic skills. And I'm going to turn you over to our session moderator, Joanne Cottery. Over to you, Joanne. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to on behalf of the Pop-Up PD Committee, and to introduce our session moderator, Tamara Cottery. Many of you may know Tamara. She's been the Executive Director of Literacy Link South Central in London since 1996, and she has an honors degree in English and quite a few other credentials as well that probably too long to mention, but include English as a second language and editing and evaluation. Tamara is really keen on partnerships that support adult learning, and she has been involved in so many initiatives because of that interest, and she's really well known for her commitment to furthering, building and furthering an effective adult literacy program and supporting learners. So Tamara, welcome, and please take it away.
Thanks, Joe. Well, I'd like to welcome everyone to our fourth pop-up PD session, Skills Advance Ontario and Literacy and Basic Skills. But before we dive in, I'd like to share a few words about the pop-up PD for Literacy Educators series. As soon as I can make my slides advance.
Does your arrow key work for you, Tamara?
No, but my mouse does, so I'll just use that instead. Okay, as you may have noticed, this is a free webinar series. I assume nobody asked you to pay any money to get in. That has been developed by a committee of Ontario's Literacy and Basic Skills regional networks and provincial support organizations for literacy. Our goal is to provide presentations that will support LBS practitioners with presentations that are topical and informative. While we've been providing these webinars in English since 2015-2016, we're in the process of providing French language transcriptions, which is kind of exciting for us. For your ease of reference, you can find all of the webinar presentations, recording links, and transcripts at the link on your screen. And last but not least, we're happy to receive topics for future webinars. Please send any ideas that you may have to eChannel at contactnorth.ca. But today we're here to learn more about Skills Advance Ontario and how literacy and basic skills programs can and do support Skills Advance Ontario pilots. I'd like to thank the Ministry of Labour, Training and Skills Development for providing me with some slides to use to share information about SAO pilots in Ontario. And we'll get to those slides in just a moment. Before we get started, though, on the specifics of the SAO pilot projects, I'd like to take a moment and briefly discuss why this topic and why now. Thanks to COVID-19, literacy and basic skills practitioners, managers, and support organizations have more than enough to think about. So why take time to talk about these pilots? First, I think it's important to note that while SAOs are still referred to as pilots, the number of SAOs are increasing across the province. I think there are between 45 and 50 such pilots currently in operation, and probably more in the proposal development/approval stage. If you don't know a whole lot about SAOs, they are employment preparation programs that are tailored to a specific sector. We'll be hearing about several sector-specific SAOs today. All of the SAO pilots that I know of have three elements: technical skills training, employment preparation/employment, and foundational essential skills training. Let me just repeat that last bit. Foundational essential skills building. As you all know, Employment Ontario funds literacy and basic skills programming. We have a strong history of providing foundational essential skills training. In some communities, this role has been recognized, and LBS programs and LBS support orgs have been sought out. In other communities, LBS has made its way to the SAO partnership table some way, somehow. And in still other communities, LBS is not at all involved, which is an interesting scenario given that the Ministry of Labour Training and Skills Development funds SAO and they fund LBS. In other words, most SAOs have a literacy skills training component. And it would be nice if we could find a way to all of the tables that might require our expertise and assistance. So again, the next 9 slides were provided to me by the Ministry of Labor, Training and Skills Development so that I could share this information with you. I will be sharing with you an overview of the SAO objectives, as well as some information about what it takes to submit a comprehensive SAO proposal. As we go through these slides, give some thought to where and how LBS services might fit advantageously. My goal is not to read the slides as you see them on the screen. I may add my own thoughts here and there as we go along. Please remember, though, that what the ministry has approved for sharing, their words, is what is written on these slides. Okay, so if I go off script, it's me talking to Mayor Cottery, it's not the ministry. Let's begin with the objectives of SAO. A couple of important points right off the bat. SAO programs are not just designed for job seekers. Some SAOs are also designed to help people who are already working in a sector to gain skills they need to be retained in their jobs. SAOs are also designed to support specific sectors where employers have identified the need to hire new workers or upskill existing workers. SAOs, in addition to providing skills training and pre-employment training, also provide placement or employment opportunities with employers. So the bottom line here is that SAOs are very employer focused. And the reason they're so employer focused is because they're intended to provide employers in specific sectors with direct access to job-ready, skilled workers. We've already talked about how SAOs, which I should mention are generally short-term, like approximately 4 to 10 weeks, are designed to give job seekers or incumbents, that's a fancy word for people who are already working in the sector, with sector-specific employment and training services. Here's some information on project proposals. I have to admit that when SAOs began to appear in communities in my area, I wondered how they came to be. Who was able to apply for them? I always had the feeling that LBS programs and organizations could not apply for SAOs, but I don't think that's true. However, given the strong employer involvement that's required, it seems to me as though LBS is well positioned to be a partner, but not necessarily the lead. In other words, the bridesmaid, but not necessarily the bride. It's expected that project proposals be based on partnerships, which suggests that there may be room for LBS to be involved. And not surprisingly, you always have to have that work plan. Sorry, guys, I'm just sort of looking through my, here we are. In order for a project to be considered for funding, it has to address an identified skills gap. You have to be able to show that there's a shortage of workers in a particular sector and that employers are willing to come to the table. And the need for the project can't be anecdotal. It must be supported by local labor market intelligence that includes consultations with local employers and key community partners. Again, the Ministry of Labor, Training and Skills Development wants to see partnerships, not just with employers, but also with community stakeholders, which could include LBS. And value for money, not surprisingly, needs to be demonstrated. This slide provides more information on what the ministry means by sector needs. Successful proposals will need to identify a specific cause or causes for the labor market shortage, and there must be specific employers involved. I don't think there's a magic number. As we all know, a single employer could require hundreds of workers. However, I think there's often more than one employer who's looking to hire qualified applicants in a given sector. Successful proposals would need to provide some information on the employers who are to be involved. For example, what job openings each employer might have. This fifth bullet seems particularly relevant for LBS programs as SAO proposals are expected to attract low-income workers, disadvantaged job seekers, and incumbent workers. And proposals are expected to identify the duration of employment opportunities. This slide reinforces the need for proposals to demonstrate knowledge of local labor markets, the potential labor pool, and some information on prospective participants. And proposals need to contain letters of support from employers as well as from training delivery partners. So a little bit about partnership development. SAOs can have, I believe, up to the first 4 months to further develop partnerships. However, proposals need to identify anticipated partners as well as their roles and responsibilities. The lead, in other words, the organization submitting the proposal, must speak to previous and/or current experience with proposed partners. They must also show that they have the organizational capacity to provide or manage sector-focused employment and training, including examples of actual partnership agreements and governance structures, for example, an advisory committee and how it might work. And another spotlight on the need for a good work plan. These are not small projects, and they have numerous moving parts. Every SAO I'm familiar with, which of course is not all of them, has identified multiple cohorts that it will serve. Comprehensive proposals must also identify targets. How many individuals will be brought into the project, how many will be placed in jobs, and what the anticipated job retention rates will be. They must identify activities, milestones, not necessarily the milestones that we know in LBS, but milestones, and timelines for achieving each of the components and subcomponents. Proposals must show their capacity for service coordination. A big part of an SAO is the support, we would know it more as wraparound support, that is provided to participants. In order to assist participants in staying engaged in the SAO programming and resulting placement, other supports, childcare, transportation, addiction services, the types of services that are familiar to most LBS programs are made available. And there's a role for assessment in the SAOs as well. Proposals are expected to identify what tool or tools they would use to determine participant pre-assessment, and I believe post-assessment, of essential and technical skills. The assessment instrument should be determined in consultation with sector partners and employers. So a little bit of information about the SAO project budget. And these are fairly large budgets. They could be anywhere from probably $500,000 and above. Although I don't think there's anything, there are no guidelines about exactly how much the proposals should be. The budget associated with partnership development is not to exceed 20% of the total project budget, and admin costs cannot exceed 15% of the total budget. And the other points on this slide are quite standard, I think. So I'd like to take a moment now to see if there are any specific questions related to the Ministry of Labor Training and Skills Development slides. And maybe Joe, you can help me out, see if there's anything that has trickled in from the chat.
So far, there's not any questions, Tamara, so just continue on. Thanks.
All right, well, thank you. And in that case, with an overview of SAO under our belt, we're going to move into some of our panelists, onto the panelist portion of our webinar. Our goal today is to provide you, our attendees, with some examples of where and how LBS has been integrated into SAO pilots. This is not an exhaustive list, but we think the examples we've chosen show a variety of ways in which LBS could potentially be involved. And while I'm not aware of LBS actually taking a lead on an SAO pilot, that doesn't mean that an LBS organization can't be the lead. And as you've probably noticed by now, SAO pilot projects are fairly significant in terms of size and in complexity. We don't have time today for each of our speakers to talk about all aspects of their SAO pilot projects, but we asked them to focus on 4 areas. General information about their SAO, what sector it's based on, etc. How they became involved in the SAO in their area. Was it a partnership identified from the get-go? Did they have to work to get involved? That sort of thing. What is their actual role in their SAO, or what is it going to be if it hasn't quite started yet? And if or how the pandemic has impacted their SAO activities. There will be 4 mini presentations, and I'll ask you to hold your questions if you can until the last presentation has been completed. If your question is really burning a hole in your mind and you need to get it out, then please post your question in the chat. I don't want anybody to forget any important questions that they might have. Okay, so let's get started with our first presenter, Lisa Ambaye. Since December of 2016, Lisa Ambaye has been the executive director of the Rideau Ottawa Valley Learning Network. a Ministry of Labor Training and Skills Development support organization providing advocacy and capacity building for 15 literacy and basic skills service providers in the City of Ottawa and the counties of Renfrew, Lanark, and Prescott-Russell. Leveraging her background in training, adult education, and employment services, Lisa has been able to use her strong connections in the community to position LBS in a number of innovative initiatives, such as 3 Ontario Centre for Workforce Development projects, pre-apprenticeship training, and a recent Skills Advance Ontario project for personal support workers and home healthcare workers. Deeply motivated to create opportunities for clients and learners to achieve their potential, Lisa strives every day to explore ways to strengthen the capacity of service providers in LBS and employment services to challenge the notion of the status quo and develop skills for increased client outcomes. So thank you, Lisa, for taking the time to be with us today. And you just have to let me know when you want me to advance the slides, okay?
Okay, thanks. So go ahead. Advance the slide.
Put me to work right away. Okay.
Okay, so thanks everyone for having me here. As a routine practice, one of the things that I do is let the employment services know of all of the curricula that have been developed, anything new that comes up. And I do that regularly in the meetings that I attend with employment services so that they're aware if they're looking to create some kind of a labor market response, that we very often have the curricula available for that. And that was the case in this situation with this Skills Advance Ontario. So my partner agency is an employment services, Pinecrest Queensway. And one of the things we did was got together to talk about some of the literacy and basic skills and private college and different things that we could do in terms of meeting a skills gap in personal support workers. And so initially she reached out to me. We had a meeting because in fact, we do have a healthcare services, our home healthcare, personal support worker curricula, and wanted to leverage that for this labor market gap. And so that started it off. The snafu happened when we realized that the employers who we were meeting with all started talking about having this certification. And I'm just going to pull up, it's the NAAC, so the NAC. And although personal support workers is not necessarily a regulated red seal trade, there is a governing body that oversees the regulated career colleges, the regulated home health care workers. And so this fell under that. And all of the employers started to say that if someone attended the home health care PSW that was offered through LBS, they would unfortunately not be able to hire them. So that meant that we needed to bring in the community colleges, and that they would have to offer the training. And so LBS, the curricula that we had, took a sort of backseat because there was this regulation and that everyone who was a personal support worker needed to sit this exam and have passed it successfully. So do you want to go to the next slide? So as mentioned, we met with employers and we brought in, at this point, the colleges. And so we're working with Willis College and Trios College. And both of them, it was unique in the sense that both of them were offering PSW, but in different methodologies, different ways. One of the ways that we found that we were able to connect the LBS to it was that each of the colleges offered a literacy test, and this varied in different ways. And so we are always doing assessments, pre-assessments for learners. So it was a way to leverage LBS's expertise in actually identifying skills gaps, because as I mentioned, the two colleges had different literacy tests and were being assessed by someone in the college who was not an LBS instructor. And so this was an opportunity to use our expertise in being able to concurrently help some of the participants gain increased literacy skills, as well as maintain their position in the PSW program. Tamara? Okay. So just touched on one of the roles that we had. The second role that we had was offering soft skills solutions, and soft skills training will be for all of them. It's definitely a gap in the workforce, and with the workers, personal support workers going into homes, needing to have the skills to be able to interact with the clientele as well as the other staff, and perhaps people within the home or in the long-term care facility, then we included the soft skills, and that's going to be something that Rovlin will develop and deliver. And then linking the pre-assessment with an LBS instructor who is able to assess effectively. And so in order to make sure that both colleges were happy with that, we have settled on one of the assessments that we'll be using, and using a Google Doc in this sort of pandemic time where we can't have people sit down and actually do the assessment. So we'll use a Google Doc, and it can be all done effectively remotely. So, Tamara?
I'm going to learn to anticipate your pauses, Lisa. That's one of my goals.
Okay.
There we go. Oh, nope. Are we here? Did I go one too many?
No, I think that's right.
Awesome.
So how has the pandemic affected it? Well, it affected it greatly. So just to give an FYI, it has not been approved yet. There were a couple of things why that hasn't happened. Number one, the incumbent is really important. So when you touched on the fact that you need to include incumbents in your plan, you have to identify the number of incumbents that you plan to train, and also how this training will improve or increase their employability. So that was one of the hangups in terms of having this approved, was that we identified incumbents. And so the question back from the ministry was, okay, so if they're already a personal support worker, how will going back into this training increase their employability? So then we looked at home healthcare workers who are responsible for cleaning and shopping and feeding and different bathing, but not necessarily personal support workers, because they don't have the certification and haven't sat for the NAC exam. We thought that those individuals would benefit from the Skills Advance Ontario, because then they could get a job in a long-term care facility and be more marketable because they have the certification. So that was one of the hangups there. Now, as for the pandemic, what happened is that there are parts of the personal support worker that you cannot do virtually. The lifting, the different care aspects that have to be demonstrated are not things that you can get around in a virtual environment. It just is impossible. And so those issues were, when we were thinking about this back in March and April, and thinking about how parts of the training could be done remotely, there was the ability to switch over, and NAC which is the governing body. They did agree that certain parts of the training could be done virtually. However, there were parts that cannot be changed. And so what we tried to do was structure the training in such a way that thinking that there wouldn't be a second wave of the pandemic, that we could possibly get to face at some point. We structured it so all of the online learning could be done at the beginning, and then some of the things that were done in person could be done later when we thought the time would improve chances. And so that is perhaps why it hasn't been approved at this point. So we're still waiting on, it's on the minister's desk, and that's all we know. So yeah, I think that's it for me.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Lisa. A couple things I picked up from your presentation, sort of thinking about Skills Advance Ontario pilots as where labor market gaps and skill gaps intersect, you know, and something that we're always thinking about skills, right? And literacy in our literacy world, but also when you start thinking about service planning tables and conversations that you might be having at your service planning tables about what are the trends in the local labor market and how can LBS be as responsive as possible. Of course, that doesn't mean participating necessarily in an SAO pilot. There are lots of ways to support what's happening in the broader labor market. But anyway, thank you so much for that. And I'm going to now move on to Courtney and Vanessa, our second set of panelists.
Tamara, can I share some questions from chat regarding what Lisa was presenting on, or
Sure.
would you rather
Okay.
hold it to the end?
I was thinking we'd hold it, but I think our timing is looking pretty good. So let's kind of keep the flow and not keep people hanging if we don't have to. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, actually, the first one is back to your part of the presentation, Tamara. And the question is, so there's no requirement for Skills Advance Ontario providers to connect with LBS prior to starting their pilots. Is that true?
I will say that that is my understanding, that that is not required. It's a nice to do. It makes sense on so many levels, or I would not have volunteered to moderate and facilitate this this conversation. But I do not think at this point in time it's written anywhere as a must do.
Great, thank you. Now, Lisa, I have 3 questions for you. One question is, you mentioned Willis and Trieste colleges. Are those private career colleges, or where?
Yes, they are.
Okay. And another question was, do you have any links, or could you share any links to soft skills resources that you're talking about?
Sure.
Great. Okay. If you could post that in chat, that would be fabulous, and we'll share it out with the notes. And the last question is, it's an interesting project, Lisa, your PSW project. And did I hear correctly that the 25 hours of soft skills training would be delivered by your network and not by a local LBS provider?
So yes, it can be delivered by a local LBS provider, because that is, there are many of them who have been trained. So what we were proposing to use was the Simcoe Muskoka Workforce Development Board Soft Skills Solutions, which is a package. It comes in a nice package of a branded package that is very comprehensive and incremental learning. So that's the one that we're going to be using, and a number of LBS have been trained in this area to deliver it.
Lisa,
Great, thank you. That's all the questions for now.
Okay.
So if I'm understanding properly, Lisa, I'm trying to interpret Barb's question. I think she's asking who would actually deliver the soft skills training if your SAO project is ever actually approved. Would it be ROVLN? Would it be a local literacy provider? Or would it depend on who had capacity at that particular time?
So what I tend to do with like the OCWI project and now with this SAO is to make it as egalitarian as possible. I send out to the network all of the network, who wants to do the assessments, who would like to do the soft skills solutions delivery, and I get the responses back based on their capacity to be able to deliver it. So at this point, because we haven't been approved, I haven't done that sort of process yet, but it's worked in the past in terms of who has the capacity and they respond, and then they're awarded the delivery of it, and then the funding that goes along with it.
So it sounds like more of a broker role for ROVLN.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Barb, I hope that's what you were kind of asking, and my apologies if I overstepped there. So, okay, good. All right. Well, I'd like to introduce Courtney and Vanessa. So while Courtney and Vanessa will be our actual speakers about the SAO in their area today, I'm told that the involvement of LBS was actually a collaborative effort between the Avon-Maitland District School Board, Conestoga College, the Adult Learning Centers of Bruce, Gray, and Georgian, as well as Quill Learning Network. So I just want to emphasize that, because I think much as Lisa was saying, it's not just about one LBS provider winning and I think the rest losing in terms of local SAO development. So I'm really proud of the way that LBS programs and networks, support orgs collaborate with each other. So first, let's hear a little bit about Courtney and Vanessa before we let them talk. So Courtney Brown is a literacy program advisor for the Centers for Employment and Learning in the Avon-Maitland District School Board. Over the past 13 years, Courtney has managed, okay, the acronym is AMDSB. It's a long, the school board's in-person LBS programming and the Anglophone stream delivery of e-channel, commonly known as the Learning Hub. Known for her ability to integrate technology in blended learning settings, Courtney has supported the Learning Hub team as they grew from 90 learners served in 2007 to over 20,000 learners served and counting. That is amazing. Wow. Vanessa Reinhardt's teaching career began in 2009. In 2013, she transitioned to the Avon-Maitland District School Board Adult Education as an online literacy practitioner and co-op teacher. Vanessa brings valuable teaching experience from her time in secondary and elementary classrooms that support her work in adult literacy. Over the past 7 years, Vanessa has held a variety of leadership roles with the Learning Hub, from working with online learners to coordinating intakes, assessment, evaluation, curriculum development, and most recently as program advisor. So take it away, Courtney and Vanessa. And again, you can either say, go Tamara, advance, ding, whatever you'd like me to do to advance the slides.
Perfect. Thank you. So I will start. Vanessa and I have a approach here today. So you can go ahead to the first slide we have. So thank you very much for the thorough introduction regarding our SAO partnership here in, I guess, our 4-county region. Vanessa and I come specifically from the Huron County area. So the SAO programs that we support and partner with are for the hospitality and tourism sector, as well as manufacturing. The contracts themselves are held by our local planning board covering Huron, Perth, Bruce, and Gray counties. And they have branded their program delivery as Connect to Skills. So as you know, there's no shortage of acronyms in LBS. So the planning board runs the SAO program under the Connect to Skills program name. They've got quite a attractive little logo there that you can see. So the LBS partners that are currently involved with that delivery in our area are Conestoga College, and we have Tina Alishaw on the call as well today. The Adult Learning Centers of Gray, Bruce, Georgian, and we have Maria Bertrand on the call as well, and the Centers for Employment and Learning. So our Classroom LBS program that you introduced, Tamara, with Vanessa and I here to speak about that today. So Tina and Maria did contribute to our slide deck, and they are on hand, but Vanessa and I are going to focus on doing the speaking today. So just a little bit more about the client focus, mostly job seekers with some incumbent workers as well. Still some challenges dealing with incumbent workers during a pandemic, but definitely doing whatever we can to reach those clients who are employed or looking to upskill for their employment. So the planning board definitely does a good job with the networking piece there. Traditionally, this program supported workers with multiple barriers to employment and a history of job retention. So clients that we're very familiar with, dealing with generational poverty issues, lack of transportation or childcare. The most referral source is through income support programs in our region, and that's just been of late. So Ontario Works and ODSP. And that's largely due to the unemployment rate across our region. So in a year ago, if we do a snapshot back to when our LBS program for the centers got involved in the SAO, the unemployment rate was 3.1 in our region, and now it's up close to 8% due to the pandemic. So a lot has happened in the last year, as it has across the province. So that's kind of why some of the demographics have shifted a little bit. We're curious as the pandemic continues if there'll be a shift in referrals for the project. I think that the market for the incumbent workers will always be there, but those who are job seeking, it's kind of an interesting climate right now, as we can all probably relate to. So we're thinking that as this pandemic evolves, and hopefully we have the light at the end of the tunnel soon, but if not, we are still dealing with some fairly high barriered clients right now who are pretty far removed from the workforce. So we'll advance on to the next slide.
Oh, I think you want to go back one, Courtney.
Oh, I'm not doing that. Thank you.
Yep.
Perfect. So just a little background about how we became involved. When the phase 1 began a few years back, it was concentrated primarily in Perth County with the manufacturing sector only. And that was initiated by the mayor in Stratford, which is what we call a city in our area, who were dealing with a huge labor shortage, that very low unemployment rate, really struggling to attract workers to the region for those entry level or mid-point manufacturing positions. So during that initial stage, we, the Centers for Employment and Learning, were not involved, but I can say, as the other sector, the hospitality and tourism, was running in Bruce and Gray, that our partners in that region who delivered LBS were involved with conducting pre and post assessments only. So they were brought in to provide that assessment service. As it phased from phase 1 into phase 2, and the need for manufacturing workers in our county region, Huron, became more prominent, there was approval to offer the manufacturing in both counties, so in Huron and Perth, and that's when our classroom LBS program got involved, and we were delivering LBS workshops in particular topic areas, and the curriculum and everything was provided by SAO itself, and we were coming in doing some assessment services, doing some workshop delivery, but it was just our program doing the intakes as they were scheduled. So that was 6 hours a week of training, and the topics were selected by SAO for LBS to deliver. And just knowing the range of benefits and supports that we can offer, it was a welcome transition for us to include the college LBS program, as well as our school board based program. So that was kind of our first kick at the can of LBS being involved. Conestoga College was delivering workshops in Perth, and the Centers for Employment and Learning were delivering workshops in Huron. So trying to keep that consistency across the 2-county region. So the collaboration was recognized right away, and the benefits to support those clients with wraparound services was very well respected. The completion rates are very good, and the placement rates were also very strong. So it was kind of nice to have a co-delivery of the 2 programs, and just kind of strengthen the referral network into those programs as well. Both programs are very familiar with performance management measurement, so that was just a natural fit. So as I mentioned, phase 2 moved into Huron County as an addition, and our literacy network actually approached the planning board and said, hey, you're doing some LBS work with SAO in Perth. How about you do the same in Huron? So that was kind of a welcome welcome addition there. So we did develop that same partnership in both Huron and Perth. So now that we're doing all of our delivery online due to the pandemic, the planning board is running their SAO program for both sectors across all 4 regions. So that brought in the LBS providers in Bruce and Gray as well. And because of that, we found it really beneficial for us, somewhat within our LSP, but a little bit beyond as well, to connect and meet and just have kind of a collaborative approach and support each other and strengthen each other, because we're all delivering the same material to the same audience, just different groups, different areas, and different instructors. So that was kind of a pretty big change for that point once the pandemic came along. So I'm just going to turn it over to Vanessa for the next couple slides.
Maybe
Sure.
before we advance, guys, I just wondered, a question has definitely come up in the chat, and I have a couple myself. So in terms of phase 1, 2, and online, I guess that's phase 3. Is this a matter of LBS using its resources, and then therefore the training that you're providing counts towards your targets, or are you being, is it a fee for service arrangement with the SAO? If you wouldn't mind talking to that.
Absolutely. There's no fee for service relationship. The LBS workshops are offered as part of our LBS delivery. So those clients are being registered in LBS for the green section and the orange section. So back in phase 1, our organization was not involved, and the adult learning centers were doing some assessment services. It's my understanding that those clients were not being registered in LBS. They were coming in from an assessment perspective only. And then once we started delivering workshops in phase 2, the college, as well as the school board, and now the community-based program in the online piece, then those clients are all being registered.
Excellent. So I could see that being a win-win for any agency that was looking to meet its targets, as long as what's being provided through the SAO is what you'd be providing in an LBS classroom, which is often the case. But I'd also like to encourage our participants to think about, well, what if you were at capacity? It's hard to think about, I think, during the pandemic, right? Because it's such a challenge. But the SAO projects are, to my knowledge, resourced to provide training. So if you happen to get to the point where you feel like you're absolutely overrun, or what your local SAO needs is something other than what you would normally be providing in your program, it doesn't mean that the door is shut, I don't think. So I just wanted to put that out there.
No.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Okay. And there was also a question in the chat, Joe, I think. Oh, yes. It would be great to learn how LBS approached the SAO to get their foot in the door. So I bet you there's not one direct answer to that question. But do you want to maybe take a couple minutes to talk about that, Courtney and Vanessa?
Sure. So it was definitely an evolution. In the beginning, during that whole, curriculum development piece, research phase, LBS wasn't really involved in the delivery. It started off, I believe, in year 2 in Perth County, when the college started offering some workshops, because of course, a large component of the delivery, part of it is very much industry specific, and pieces that LBS wouldn't touch, but a lot of it is essential skills based, and soft skills and retention and all those pieces that we deal with. So I have to attribute the success to our network, who was very much involved with communicating with our planning board and saying, hey, these guys can help out. They have the expertise. They can help with assessments. They can help with curriculum. They work with high barrier clients already. So that's what really forged that partnership in a successful way.
Thanks. Vanessa, is there anything you want to add to that?
I think it's good. I think as we kind of go along, they might get some more pieces for that, for sure, of our specific project.
So we haven't really talked much about the curriculum development piece because it didn't come up in the slides that I was given by the ministry. But for those folks who are listening in, every SAO has a curriculum development component. And the intention is for the curriculum to be developed. Paulette, you might talk about this a little bit later as well, but for the curriculum to be developed based on direct feedback from employers. So it's not about LBS practitioners or anybody else for that matter trying to dream up what people in the manufacturing sector need to know in order to retain jobs or whatever. So that could also be a potential role for LBS to play, is if there was as happened recently in the City of London here, where the city has an SAO and they put out a call for proposals for someone to do some of that work, right? So something to think about. I know we're not always positioned to respond to large calls for proposals for lots of reasons, but that curriculum development piece is certainly an area where LBS could have some feedback. And I just want to acknowledge some kudos here in the chat for Deb Flynn, who is the network representative that has been mentioned by Courtney and Vanessa. So well done. Okay. Now
Perfect. So you can go to the next slide there, Tamara. Thank
There
you
we
so
go.
much. So we're going to get a little bit more specific about our SAO project. Courtney lightly touched on the beginning of it, and as she mentioned, it's kind of evolved over time. So the beginning part, where we were offering workshops. So first in Bruce and Gray, it was solely just the assessments as they were coming in. So none of those learners or participants were registered in their program. Then Perth, Conestoga, who had developed the curriculum that they were doing, did a section of the workshops when the program moved into Perth County, offering solely for manufacturing at that point. And they did that 6 hours a week of facilitation of workshops. And then eventually that moved into Huron County. So our workshops that we offered were a little bit different. And this was when we were in person, so pre-pandemic. We did workshops such as healthy habits, time management, some budgeting, writing, document use, general computer skills, including Excel, computer usage, internet safety, those types of pieces, where they might be touching it for job searching and so on and so forth. So over time, those were offered in person. Over time, as pandemic came, we're offering both hospitality and tourism in addition to the manufacturing that we started out with across the 4 regions. So now the 3 LBS partners, so Conestoga, Centers for Employment and Learning, which is Avon Maitland, and the Adult Learning Centers in Bruce and Gray, are now offering workshops in both manufacturing and tourism. We offer now 4 workshops instead of the original additional workshops that we had when we were in person, online. And that equates to about 1/3 of the essential skills workshops on the schedule during that initial piece. And so those are more specific to document use, numeracy, reading, writing, and digital skills. So it's kind of evolved over time a little bit. But that's the kind of where we are sitting right now and where we've gotten to. The curriculum was provided to us, but we have definitely augmented it and included some additional industry specific examples. And we work alongside with Connect to Skills. They provide us additional stuff as we requested as well. So it's kind of evolving over time. It's not that it was ever exactly as we had it initially. So I think coming into, if you were to join on forces for an SAO project, you need to be prepared to be flexible and to evolve over time, because we obviously, with LBS programs, our focus is the clients, but the SAO project focus is the employer. So you need to come and be able to think about both sides of the picture for sure. So there's been transitions, and there's been challenges, and there's a lot of partners that are involved with our particular SAO. And so communication above all is very important, along with that flexibility, I would say. So it's been great for sure. Tamara, if you wanted to move to that next slide, that would be great. I kind of started to touch on how the pandemic has really started to affect us. So obviously, prior to that, we were doing all of our services in person and all our workshops and all those other pieces, giving additional support where needed. So the pandemic hit, and it was interesting to say the least. So Connect to Skills has been really great in supporting us, and decided to move the program online, to be able to continue offering this service to the greater region, when we weren't able to be in person. So it's certainly been a challenge, and lots has been learned, but it's also offered a lot of great things for us too. It's given us the opportunity. Prior to the pandemic, we were kind of working in silos. So even though we had the same curriculum, Conestoga was kind of doing their own thing, and Huron was kind of doing their own thing. The pandemic allowed us to bring in Bruce and Gray regions to also be offering that when they spread it across the 4, because we're online. So that allows kind of that flexibility to accept more participants. But it's also allowed the LBS programs across those 4 regions the opportunity to work together. And that has been the most valuable part for me, I have to say personally. Because we're able to work on forging those close relationships, ensuring consistency of the programming and the workshops that we're offering to those participants. So it doesn't matter if somebody's coming in from Bruce and Gray, or whether they're coming from Stratford, they're going to get the same workshop content no matter where they are. And I think that that's really valuable in terms of an SAO project underneath the same name. It allowed us to share our best practices, things that were working, things that we wanted to refine. So it's been a really great opportunity for our LBS programs, for sure. It did also come with some challenges, as most LBS programs have experienced. It's working through that registration process from a distance when we used to be paper and pencil. Being able to securely exchange information throughout the different providers. So from the Connect Skills registration staff giving us the information, and us being able to translate across to them. The referral process for sure is a little bit different. So it's still a work in progress, but we're really happy with the retention and the engagement within the training portion. So the portion that we're involved in. Obviously, placements have been a little bit more challenging since the pandemic started, and the cohorts have been perhaps a little bit smaller than what we were used to with our in-person delivery. So specifically the number of participants from, say, Huron County that we would register versus Perth County versus the other. But we are working on it, and it's going well. So we're kind of co-facilitating across the 3 different providers for the LBS portion. Yeah, it's been really great, and I can't say enough that it's been a wonderful experience getting to know or developing a closer relationship with some of the LBS programs across the region that I think some of our employees, specifically in Avon-Maitland, may not have had the opportunity to do in a classroom type of way. I think we can go to the next slide.
Vanessa a quick question from one of the participants? Is that fine?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a later one as well for you, Courtney, but that can maybe wait till the next break. So Vanessa, are these courses you're speaking of, are they delivered as one workshop per topic, or more like a short course? And are milestones completed in each topic area? And are the milestones based on the individual learner and their needs, or are they the same milestone for all?
So they're kind of one workshop, and they have some activities that go along with it. We do milestones, not one for every workshop. So we have a few different, depending on the learner's level, because obviously you can't go in and expect everybody's going to do a level 2 milestone. That's just unreasonable. And also to say that within kind of 4 workshops, it would be perhaps unreasonable to think that you're going to achieve 4 milestones. You have to meet the learner where they are. And so obviously the goal for sure is to complete 1 at least. We aim for 2 potentially. We've kind of handpicked a few that we feel align very nicely with the workshops that we are delivering, but always open to flexibility if that doesn't meet the needs of the particular participants that we're working with, just because we are in our region dealing with multiple barriers for the participants that are part of the program.
Thank you.
No problem. All right, Tamara, you can go to the next slide.
Trying.
Pressure's on.
Okay. All right. So
Oh, I don't think that's the next slide.
it
I
is
think
on my.
questions are for the end.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. I was like worried there. I'm like, what have I done? So I want to thank. So Joe, you said there was a question for Courtney, but we're going to come back to it later.
Sure, I can ask it either now or at the end, whatever you prefer.
Well, let's move on to our next presenter, and then we'll come back for some more questions. Okay. So thank you so much, Courtney and Vanessa, for sharing information on the SAO pilots in your region. And our next presenter is Paulette Desjardins. Paulette has over 30 years experience in the employment and training field. Her career started in this field as a supervisor of the Canada Employment Centre for Students, which was followed by numerous positions as employment counselor and workshop facilitator for London service providers, such as the London Employment Help Centre and Le Collège de Grand Lac. Oh, you guys are going to make me try to speak French. Paulette was fortunate to be manager of community training services for Goodwill's Career Centre for 8 years, under the guidance and inspiration of Mr. Robert Collins. She then joined the Ministry of Training, Colleges and Universities, where she worked as an employment and training consultant for 15 years. Paulette was actually the employment and training consultant for Literacy Link South Central for a number of years. She retired from the ministry on March 31st, 2019, but did not retire as she joined the CCFL, the London French Community Centre, on April 19th, 2019. She is currently a project manager and manager of immigration services for the CCFL. So welcome, Paulette.
Thank you. Thank you. I wish I could see everybody, just because I know some of you, and so it would be great to say hi, but that's all right. So I'm just going to say hi out there to whoever's there. What I wanted desperately today to do was to tell you all that we received approval for our project, but I can't, and so. So it's gonna happen. I'm convinced of that, and waiting momentarily for approval of our SAO project, and looking forward to getting that underway. And so, oh, I see what you did. Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. You dressed up our slides. Very nice. Very good. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about our project. But first, who we are, le Carrefour Communautaire Francophone de London. So the French Community Resource Center in London, we offer a number of services. Settlement services in school for new Canadians. We have senior programs. We offer a number of activities to the Francophone community as a whole. And so we have a number of programs. But one of the things that we also offer are services before and after school childcare services in every French language school in London. And in every classroom. And so as a child care service provider, we are an employer. And so as an employer in the child care sector, And based on my previous experience of having knowledge of the SAO program, one of the first things that I wanted to do when I joined the CCFL is to see whether we could get together and prepare a proposal for an SAO program for the childcare sector. Of course, my executive director was right alongside, and so we did that. And so what we are proposing is to establish an advisory committee made up of 5 Francophone and 5 Anglophone employers, including school boards, 2 ES partners, 3 LBS partners, including Leadership Link South Central, and the Workforce Planning Development Board. And so let me just stop right there. Sorry, I'm going to stop my sentence to say the partners on this project are Literacy Link South Central, the Workforce Planning Development Board, and as an employer in the sector, we are a member of the Licensed Childcare Network in London, which is a network of 54 employers in the childcare sector. So going on with my sentence, along with the Workforce Planning Board, we will determine the immediate needs of childcare sector employers through a needs assessment process to develop short-term training, so 10 weeks, that will be provided to 90 Employment Ontario job seekers and 40 incumbent workers in the sector. Job seekers will receive training that will follow, or following the training will get a 3-week minimum work placement in an employment afterwards in the sector. Okay, ding.
Thank you.
So how did we become involved? Well, I was fully aware of a labor market partnership proposal that was developed by the City of London as their ETC regarding a study that they had done related to the demands and the needs of the childcare sector. So I knew for many years, also sitting on various Francophone committees, kept hearing over and over and over again how desperate employers were in the field. Enough workers, not enough people with skills. And so I was fully aware that there was a need. And knowing that the crisis existed, there's numerous other labor market studies and reports that have declared recruitment and retention crisis in the childcare sector. So I knew of the crisis in the sector and the objectives of the SEO program and thought, let's do something here. And so reports that have been produced indicate that a pool of job-ready, skilled workers that meet the workforce development needs of employers is vital. Job seekers and incumbent workers require childcare sector focused employment and training services. And because of the need and because we are an employer, we got involved. Ding. What is our role? The CCFL will be the lead. And as the lead, we will have project oversight and agreement management, budget management and disbursement of funds to partners, accountability to the ministry on behalf of participating employers and training partners, providing oversight to partners in developing and delivering relevant project components. We're gonna have to hire some staff and orient them and supervise them. CAMS data entry and report analysis, Ministry of Labor training and skills development reporting, as well as reporting to partners, coordinating, preparing for and chairing executive and advisory committee meetings, reviewing Francophone curriculum, overseeing and carrying out recruitment, screening, registration, orientation, and pre-employment services for participants, coordinating sectors-focused employment services such as job matching and placements, and providing post-employment services to participants to help them retain jobs and advance in their career. Ding.
Oh, Paulette, I think I might have left out your pandemic planning slide, and I apologize for that. So,
You know what? I have it right here.
okay,
Can I read?
sure.
Okay. And so, but there was also another slide, Tamara, regarding what we've learned. Is that for later on?
It is for later on, yeah.
Thank you. All right. So as far as the pandemic is concerned, I think I don't need to tell this group that we needed to build in flexibility in our service delivery options, face-to-face for accessibility and technical competency levels. And so you have to have that component in there for those who don't have the accessibility or the technical competencies in order to follow us in a Zoom meeting or that kind of thing. I think there needs to be flexibility in the virtual delivery so that it's available at numerous hours or a number of different options, evenings, weekends, as people work, especially for the incumbents. And then the range of adult education principles and techniques that can be offered virtually, I think might create a challenge. And so we really need to look at how we can be flexible with incorporating adult and education techniques and methodologies.
Thank you, Paulette. I have to say that I feel extremely fortunate that Paulette reached out to us, Literacy Link South Central, when this SAO proposal was just a twinkle in Paulette's eye. We have had the opportunity to be involved as a partner in the proposal from the beginning. So writing some of the text, adding input for the work plan and the budget, and thinking of ways in which LBS could support the SAO project. So thanks very much for that, Paulette. And now I'd like to introduce our fourth and final presentation, which will be shared by Lindy Bancroft. So full disclosure, I heard about the Construct Your Career SAO. It's actually running within our Literacy Link South Central networking area. However, last week during Literacy Service Planning, I had the opportunity to hear about it in more detail. I was really pleased to see the extent to which LBS is involved in this SAO, and I reached out to St. Leonard's Community Services just a few days ago to ask them if they could be involved today. They agreed, but because of the short notice, there was no time to develop a slide deck. Lindy will be our speaker today to share more about their Construct Your Career program. But first, a bit about Lindy. Lindy Bancroft is a supervisor at St. Leonard's Community Services. She supervises the Skills Advance Ontario project, Construct Your Career, focusing on assisting individuals in obtaining work in the construction industry. Additionally, she supervises the Youth Employment Skills Strategy Program, Work Readiness and Advancement Program for youth experiencing hardships who have that have made finding and maintaining work difficult. So thank you very much, Lindy, for being with us today, and over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting us to join with you today. So yes, our project, our SAO project is called Construct Your Career. So as was stated in the bio, our sector is the construction industry. So at St. Leonard's Community Services, we are an EO provider, so an Employment Ontario provider, and taking the lead on this project. So we are currently in the first year of this project. So we just gained the funding and the approval back in March, and that is just when the pandemic hit. So I'll talk about that later. So our program is 8 weeks long in training, with a 2 to 4 week job placement at the end. So our LBS partner on this project is Brant Skills Center, and our work-related training partner is developed through Conestoga College at the Brantford Airport campus, where the participants complete 6 weeks of hands-on learning and learn the basics of blueprint reading, carpentry, plumbing, and electrical. And our first cohort began on August the 31st of this year. So that cohort is actually just finishing up the training portion of the program right now. So they complete tomorrow. And then we have our first round of participants starting work next week. So we actually have one individual who's being hired on as an electrical apprentice. So we're very excited about that. And then we have a few others who are also hired in the construction industry. So very excited about that. And our second cohort is actually running right now as well. So busy time. So our second cohort started on October the 12th, and then our third cohort begin on January the 4th. So our project, we are funded to have 60 participants in this fiscal year. So we're running 3 cohorts of 20 participants in each group. So just in terms of how we got involved with this SAO. So as I mentioned earlier, we are an Employment Ontario service provider. So we work with employers a lot, and our director last year noticed that we were having, a constant reach out from the construction industry, from employers looking for skilled workers who had some experience in the industry. There was a serious labor shortage here in Brantford and Brant County in that area. So he then reached out to a few local employers just to get their input on what a project, what an SAO project might look like in this sector, as well as reached out to our LBS provider here, which is the Brant Skills Center. So we're very fortunate here that we actually share office space with our LBS provider, Brant Skills. So we already have a very good relationship and partnership there. So our director reached out to their director there, and they were involved from the very beginning and planning stages of our project. And then also Malcolm reached out to, so our director Malcolm reached out to Conestoga College to see about the hard skills training component of this project as well. So in terms of roles for this project, so our role at St. Leonard's is we are the lead on the project and the main contact for our participants in the program. So we and our employment consultants follow the participants throughout their time with us, as well as connect with both Brant Skills Center, our LBS partner, and our partner at Conestoga College to ensure that the students are all doing well in the program. And we also chair the advisory committee for the project as well. So our LBS partner of Brant Skills Center is a member of our advisory committee, and they actually are involved in our project in a few different ways. So the first one being that they complete the assessment, so the pre-assessment. So they're doing the ESOT assessment for our program. And they, look at those assessment results and determine, if their levels are at a point where they would be a successful candidate for the program. If their levels are a little low, then it's recommended to that individual that they then spend some time at Brant Skills Center doing some upgrading. And then after spending some time with them, they would come back to us to then participate in the program, so they would be more successful. But if the learners' levels are good, then they will join us in that cohort and begin training with us. So the second area where Brant Skills Center is involved with ours is they also provide training. So they provide the essential skills portion of our training. So they're responsible for 30 hours over the course of the first 2 weeks of our program. So they basically created their own with our input as well as our input from our advisory committee as to what that section would look like. So they primarily focus on, skills in math and numeracy for construction. So how to read a tape measure, how to complete timesheets, all of those pieces is what our LBS provider is doing for us. And they're involved on a pay for service model with us. So they help us out in those first 2 weeks as well. And then lastly, just about how the pandemic has affected our SAO activities. So as I mentioned, this is our first year of the project, and we did start in March. So right when the pandemic was first starting. So we were planning on actually having 4 cohorts over the course of the fiscal year. But due to public health recommendations, there was a delay in that. So we didn't end up doing our first cohort until August the 31st. And now the pandemic has also changed a little bit about our delivery model as well. So our first two weeks with us and Brant Skills Center are spent online. So we use kind of a combination of a few different online platforms. So we use Zoom, we use Big Blue Button and Moodle. So with those 3 components, the students log in with us every day and complete that training in the beginning. And then when they head off to Conestoga, they are actually still doing a hands-on component there. Because those skills in carpentry and plumbing and electrical are so hands-on. So they're actually building little units up at the airport campus where they practice framing and putting in plumbing and electrical. So very amazing work happening there. All of our students are wearing masks and practicing social distancing as much as possible. And they are also screened every day prior to going in on site. The pandemic has brought with it its own challenges and unique circumstances for us, for sure. Certainly been a lot more than we originally signed up for, I think, but it's been a great learning experience for us. And we're actually able now, because of the pandemic and the clientele that we work with, some of them didn't have access to technology or Wi-Fi or internet to connect to each day. So now through our client support section of the project, we can actually, get them a tablet and get them a little MiFi device to allow them to participate in that training, and also to make it easier for us to contact them on a daily basis. So in some ways, that we've definitely found some new and exciting ways to interact with our folks in the project. Yeah, that's all I have for you today. Thanks again.
Well, thank you so much, Lindy, for being available on such short notice. I think it's fascinating that some of the face-to-face training is happening in an airport hangar. If ever you needed to have some space, right? Like that's a good, if you have an extra airport hangar in your community, feel free to check it out for some delivery options. And I can also appreciate that launching a program. I think, Courtney, you said this in the chat, right at the start of a pandemic is so difficult. I don't ever remember seeing a prepare for pandemic budget line in any proposal I've ever completed. So that you really have to think on your feet. So I do have a few more questions for our folks, but I'm mindful of the time and I want to make sure that our attendees have an opportunity. I think a lot of what I've been hearing is around partnerships. And I think there was a question specific to, was it really that easy to develop a partnership? I bet you it wasn't. So I wondered, I'd like to hear from any of our panelists who would care to share on this particular topic about the role of partnerships. And why do you think, if you do, that it takes a village for an SAO to be successful? Does anybody want to chime in on that?
I can share a few words, Tamara.
Thanks, Courtney.
Honestly, when you first brought forward that term, it takes a village, it really hit home with me because it does. The clients that we are working with, in our experience, really do benefit from those wraparound supports. It's not just a quick in and out 4 weeks and off they go. They're employee ready and retention ready. So there are clients who cycle, and there are clients who need additional supports or identify other learning goals that they might want to pursue after their training and once they get that employment piece taken care of and are comfortable on the job. So really, that's been one of our huge success pieces, to consider the employer needs as well as the client's needs and kind of marry them together, and help them when they're employed. Of course, SAO does follow them for 12 months and provides that employment support piece. But from all the other types of referrals that LBS is capable of making and the connections that we have, it's definitely valuable. The piece with employment services is interesting as well. In our experience, employment services have been involved, but SAO does most of the recruitment out and the placement piece themselves. So just having them know that there's somebody in their community that they maybe weren't aware of prior to their training that they can come back to, if perhaps the job doesn't work out or they want to go in a different direction, perhaps of a different industry. It's just nice to have that soft touch and introduction. Each service provider in our experience have really complemented each other, for really developing strong and meaningful partnerships and really benefiting our working relationships as well. We feel that the goals of SAO is to secure the employment, but mostly the clients do need those extra kind of like hand holding or ongoing coaching experiences. Just we just are pretty flexible, so it's just nice to have each other.
Excellent, thank you. And I want to encourage our attendees who are still able to be with us, say, for the next 10 minutes. If you have any additional questions, please do put those in the chat. Paulette.
I was just going to suggest, in answer to your question, that this is not an individual need, it's a sector need. And so as such, then it really does take an entire village to meet that need. But if you look at it from the perspective of Employment Ontario, and there are so many programs available through Employment Ontario, whether that be LBS, apprenticeship, ES, COGI, you name them, okay? All of those programs are there because they're needed in order to meet all of those needs, right? I don't want to take too much time. I can address other things, particularly ES and or my thoughts on that and the partnerships, which really are crucial. They really are the most important part of an SAO. You really have to pick the good partners. And in my mind, there was no other partner. It was Literacy Link South Central. It was the Workforce Planning Board, and it was our Association of Childcare Employers. There was no other option. And I think from a local office perspective and a regional office perspective of the ministry, they were totally in support of that. In fact, to the point where they indicated in an assessment of the proposal that the lead training delivery partner is a very good choice because their experience in curriculum development, the development of digital literacy is very interesting and appropriate during the time of a pandemic and the new working environment. So that was comments from the ministry regarding your involvement as a partner. Tamara.
Well, thanks, Paulette. And just as much as Lisa was saying, for our part, we're kind of like the flow through, right? I mean, we have awareness of the LBS landscape and we have relationships with our LBS partners. And so as the training lead, I guess, we do not anticipate delivering the training ourselves, right? We see that as being a collaborative activity, something that we'll have to discuss with our community partners because they're the ones who have the expertise in delivery. I wondered if we could take a look just very quickly. A lot of ideas have been thrown around.
Tamara?
Yes.
Hi, I just wanted to jump into one of the things that's really effective about partnering is that it's not reliant on one incumbent to have all of the connections. And that was one of the strengths of the personal support workers SAO, is that the employment services already had a lot of the connections and brought the employers to the table. And so some chose not to continue on with the SAO, but they will still benefit from the SAO because there will be more individuals in the workforce that will be able to fill the positions. But it really, with LBS, it would take a lot of additional effort to go out and find those employers. And so that's why within a village kind of scenario, everyone's bringing their strengths. And so bringing in the two private career colleges, they already had the curricula available and the connection with the governing body. So that was a good thing. It's not like we would have to have our curricula up to speed and then form a connection with NAC. So I think that's why it's really important to have that that village mentality.
Thanks, Lisa. So I realize that we've provided a lot of suggestions and examples for how LBS has been involved in some of the SAO projects. It's not always an easy row to hoe. I could not believe it when somebody knocked on my door or sent me an email saying, hey, do you think you want to be a partner? I'm much more accustomed to having to remind community partners that literacy and basic skills exists and what it does. So for those of you who are, perhaps not currently involved in an SAO, but hoping to become involved in one, or maybe hearing whisperings of the development of one in your community, I thought maybe we close out today's session by really trying to hone in on where are those opportunities for LBS to be involved before, during, and after an SAO. And I'm going to kick this off just by saying, obviously, we have had the opportunity through Paulette's SAO project to be involved in the development of, right, to really think through some of those pieces. But also as an executive director of a literacy network, I've been thinking about, okay, what about our programs that are not involved in SAO? We have a lot of people who come to our programs because we need to prepare them and help them prepare for employment. Well, if any of the local SAOs are the types of work that they would want to do, what better way to build your skills and then have direct access to an employer who is craving people, right? That's why they come to the table in the first place. So I see it as there's an opportunity at any point for us to be preparing people. Linda, you mentioned multiple cohorts, right? Every SAO has multiple cohorts. So people who are not initially ready to participate in an SAO, then they could be referred to LBS. Or maybe like in the case of our local program, there's a wait list. So that means that some people are interested, but maybe they haven't been in working or in a job in quite some time. And so perhaps participating with LBS for a month or two before their cohort can start gets them into that daily routine, gets them thinking about time management and all of those kinds of things. So that's what I see as some opportunities. Do any of our speakers want to jump in there?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So that was definitely one of the thoughts in coming into this. The private career colleges said that if someone isn't able to meet the basic communication literacy assessment, that they're not entered in. But this is a new way of thinking in that we can do this concurrently. So they can attend an LBS program while still participating in the career college moving forward. It was that new knowledge that will hopefully help other people and remove a barrier to them participating in the training. Not only the training, but as a career in PSW, they'll be able to have that option now. And so that was a good thing that came out of that.
Thanks, Lisa.
I have some thoughts about like more on the communication. So like our literacy network was key in how Huron County started to be able to offer some workshops. So I think involving those literacy networks. So I really appreciate the things like that Tamira and Lisa are doing to make sure that all parties are always informed and with the opportunities that are coming forth. But then like further to that, when you're in the project, I think we found it really valuable where all of our LBS programs, so Grey Bruce, Huron, and Perth, meet on a weekly. The facilitators of the workshops meet weekly to discuss what are the hiccups, what things are we changing, what things are, how do we want to involve it and make it better. And I think having also further to that, we have a wrap-up meeting with all people that are involved within the SAO after every intake. What went well, what was kind of like, maybe we should reconsider that again, right? Is so important. So the reflection and the evolution of the program is something that definitely has been happening within our region, but I would like to think that it happens within all regions.
Well, I'm not sure that it does, Vanessa, but this is where we're trying to move the markers, right? Like sometimes in a given community through, foresight, personalities that jive, who knows what makes that great combination, because it doesn't always come down through policy. So how can we learn from each other to try to initiate those partnerships and sustain them, because we know that they're so effective for people that we work with. Paulette, I saw your hand in the air, or your finger, I think. Is there something you wanted to add here? You're currently on mute, just if you forgot.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, just a couple things if I can. I think that there are opportunities during the annual LBS service planning meetings to potentially identify needs of employers and or sectors. I think that local LBS programs can identify employer needs and local employer networks through labor market information, through ES co-location, through ES partnerships, and through the workforce development planning boards in their areas. And I believe that programs themselves may not have the capacity to actually develop a proposal, but can communicate those needs to regional networks and provincial support orgs for further development. I think that LBS programs can request information from SAOs on training delivery partner selection processes, because we are going to have to do one. There is going to have to be a selection process. That information can be requested. And I think unlike COGI, which was a training program for employers, and many private trainers had those contacts already with employers and potentially already providing them with training. This is an equal playing field here. I don't believe that private trainers have, well, maybe perhaps they do, but it needs to be with a large body of employers, associations, networks that are already existing, where connections can be made to promote LBS.
Thanks, Paulette. I know we've reached the end of our time. Joanne, is there anything that we need to be attending to in the chat?
No, there's no questions, but many kudos to everyone and comments about the innovation, the partnerships, just how inspiring and insightful this has been. So, and regrets that people have to leave because it was the end of the stated time, but just how it really seemed to be a great experience for so many and how much they learned from all of you, and appreciate all your great comments and just I guess amazement at the partnerships and the hard work, and also the what happened that you did this during COVID, and it's so kudos to everyone involved.
Well, I would like to encourage everybody who is still online to complete the evaluation, which I believe the link is in the chat. We really do need to hear from you about not just the topic, but how we've introduced it and what kind of an impact you think it might have on your work. And I'd like to thank our presenters for sharing your time and your expertise today. I feel like I'm hearing about silos that are coming down and at the same time, a community of practice that is building. So I'd like to continue to leverage that. Paulette, I stole that from you, that community of practice idea. So thank you for planting that seed in my head, because I don't think we need to continually all break the same soil over and over and over again. If we can continue to learn from each other, that's the best way to go. Thank you, Sarah, for doing all that you do to keep these pop-up PD sessions on track and well coordinated from a technical perspective. And thank you, Joanne, for assisting me with the moderation today. So with that, I'm going to wish everybody a great Thursday afternoon. And again, thank you so much for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.